going to go through a demo of a NextJS 15 application that uses the Stripe checkout page. So suppose we have an online bookstore where people can purchase books from us. Here we have one book for sale, Programming 101. If the user wants to purchase the book, then they'll click on this Purchase Book button. Once they click on that, you can see that they get redirected to the Stripe checkout page. So on the left, they can see details about the product they're purchasing. And then here on the right, they can specify their payment details. So here I'm going to enter in some fake details just for testing purposes. Once I confirm that my payment details are correct, then I'll click on the Pay button. And internally, my payment will be processed by Stripe. So if everything looks good, then we get redirected back to our bookstore page. And you can see that the payment was successful. So now, how do we actually build this Next.js 15 application? Well, the first thing is we want to create a product to sell. And we can do this by going to our Stripe dashboard. So that's in dashboard.stripe.com. Once we're in our dashboard, we should go to our product catalog. So the product catalog will show all the items we have for sale. So you can see that I already have one item here called Programming 101. So that's just the item that you can see on our homepage here. Now, for the sake of a demo, I'll walk through the process of creating a new product. So in the top right, there's a button called Create Product. If you click on it, and then here we enter in all the details for our product. So I'm just going to copy the same details, but here I'll just say New Programming 101. I'll put the description as the same, and we can also upload an image of our product. The next thing is we need to specify the payment type. For our books, we're going to do a one-off payment of $29.99. This means that the user only needs to pay a one-time payment of $29.99. If we did reoccurring, then this would work for subscription-style businesses. But for us, we just need a one-time payment. Once I confirm that all my details are fine, then I can click on Add Product. Now you can see here in our product catalog that we have a new product, New Programming 101, which we just created. Okay, so now that we have the product, we can start to integrate Stripe within our Next.js application. So for the sake of time, I've already created the Next.js 15 application, and I'm just going to showcase the different components that you need to integrate with Stripe. So the first thing is we want to install all of these Stripe dependencies. Okay, because internally we will call Stripe APIs. So here in my package.json, you can see that I have created I'm installing the Stripe-JS package and also the Stripe package. So you can use whatever package manager you prefer and install these two dependencies. So since we are calling Stripe APIs, we also need to get our Stripe API credentials. So to do this, we'll go back to the Stripe dashboard. And in the middle, you'll see this section where it says for developers. And here you can see the publishable key and the secret key. So these are two things that are very important when calling Stripe APIs. The best practice for storing these keys is to store them as environment variables in our application. So in Next.js 15, it's very simple. We can create a .env.local file, and this is where we can set our environment variables. So here we have the environment variable name, and then we set it to the value, okay? So here you can see I have environment variable for the public Stripe publishable key and for the Stripe secret key. So you can just copy these values and then paste them into your .env.local. Now here I'm using a test account, so I'm not too worried about exposing my secret key. But if you have a production account with real products and real customers, then you need to be very careful that you don't expose your secret key. So now that I've installed the dependencies for Stripe and I've set the environment variables, we also want to create a simple utility for interacting with Stripe. So to do this, I go to stripe/lib/stripe.js. So this is a very simple utility. I'm basically creating a new Stripe object with our given API key. So now in downstream API calls to Stripe, we can just use the Stripe object. Now let's go back to our homepage. And here you can see that I have a very basic listing page here with all the details about the product. So I have a Next.js 15 application with the application router. So this homepage is going to be in source/app/page.js. So at the bottom here, you can see this is the markup for the product listing. And just for sake of demo, all these things are hard-coded, like the title and description and price. So the content here is not very important, but the thing to really focus on here is the on-click handler for the button. When we click on the purchase button, we're going to call this handle purchase function. So this handle purchase function has two important responsibilities. The first is that it will create a Stripe checkout session. Then once it creates a session, it's going to redirect the user to the Stripe checkout page. Okay, so the checkout page is where the user can see the product details and also enter in their payment details and finally purchase. So let's first look a bit closer into how to create a Stripe checkout session. So to do this, we're going to call an API route that we create called API/Stripe/checkout. I'll talk more about how this is actually implemented, but the most important thing to realize right now is that when we create a checkout session, we need to pass in a price ID. So price ID is basically an ID that corresponds to your product and price combination. So we can find this price ID by going to the Stripe dashboard. So let's go back to the dashboard, click on product catalog, and we want to sell the new product here. So click on the product we just created. And here, this is the product page where you can see all the details for this product. On the right, you'll see a product ID. This is actually not what we want right now. We want the price ID. So if you scroll down to the events, you'll see one event where it says a new price called price_some value was created. Once I have my price ID, let me go back to our page.js, and here I'm going to replace this price ID with the price ID of our new product. So now let's dive a little deeper into what's happening here in our API route. This is located under source/app/API Stripe checkout, then route.js. So at the top, you can see we are importing Stripe from our Stripe utility function. Now, the most important thing in this API route is we're going to create a Stripe checkout session, right, starting at line 15. And to do this, we're using stripe.checkout.sessions.create. This is a Stripe API we're calling here. Now for .create, we need to pass in some line items. So line items are basically the items that the user is purchasing. And here we're specifying price ID. So this is going to be the same price ID, or this will be the price ID that corresponds to the combination of product and price. Then for mode, we're specifying payment. Payment means a one-time payment. And then there's a success URL parameter, which I'll talk about later, but basically this is the page we want to redirect the user after the checkout was complete. But really the main thing here in line 15, we're basically creating a new checkout session, and we're also passing in our price ID. Now, once we have our session created, we're going to return the URL. And the URL here is basically the URL to the checkout page. Now, if I go back to page.js, you can see here in line 7, I'm calling the API Stripe checkout route that I just showed. And then here in line 23, I'm going to get the URL from the response. And then in line 24, I'm going to redirect the user to that checkout page. Okay, so let's go back to the demo and see this in action. So I'm here in my homepage. I'm going to click on Purchase Book. Now internally, what happened? So I clicked on the button, then I'm going to call our API route, API/Stripe/checkout, and that is going to create a Stripe checkout session for us. And then we're going to get the URL to the Stripe checkout, and we're going to redirect the user. And you can see here, once I clicked on the purchase button, that I was redirected to the Stripe checkout page. And you can see this item here, New Programming 101. So this is basically a line item that we've specified. And here I can enter in my payment details as before. So I'll enter them again. And I'm going to press pay. And now here I'm redirected back to the bookstore page. And you can see here that I have a message saying payment was successful. Now let me go back to the API route, and I'll talk more about the success URL. So you can see here in line 15, we're creating a new session with stripe.checkouts.session.create. And one of the required parameters is a success URL. So the success URL is basically the web page we want to send the users after a checkout is complete. And you can see here that I'm going to a page, a success page, and I'm going to pass in the session ID to the page. So this page is implemented in source/app/order/success and then page.js. Now here in the success page, you can see that I'm getting the session ID. Then with that session ID, I retrieve the session using stripe.checkout.sessions.retrieve. Then based on the payment status of the session, I'm going to render different content. Okay, so if the session has a paid payment status, then I'm going to say that the order has been successfully placed. Okay, and that's what we see here. Now, one thing to be very clear so far is that we've only checked the payment status in the front end. So what do I mean by this? Let me purchase the book again, and I will click on pay. Payment gets processed, and then I, as a user, I'll only know that the payment was successful because I've been redirected to the success page. Now, it's possible that the user may exit out of this page on accident. And also, in real life, you may want to do other things once a user has successfully paid. For example, you may want to send them an email. You may want to send them a text message. Maybe you have integrations with some other social platforms and you want to send them a message. Or maybe internally you need to do things like add the user to a database, or maybe call third-party APIs. So all those actions that I described, those are best handled on the server side, not on the front end. Now, to properly handle those on the server side, you will need to properly implement Stripe webhooks. So Stripe webhooks is not going to be discussed in this video. I will have a separate demonstration discussing the Stripe webhook. But for now, we have a very basic demonstration of using a NextJS 15 application with Stripe.